The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with nervous energy. Ambassador Zexnari of the Vorthan Empire stood at the center podium, his four arms gesturing wildly as he addressed the assembled representatives from across the galaxy. His purple scales shimmered under the harsh artificial lights, betraying his anxiety despite his attempts to appear confident. "The humans have grown too bold," Zexnari declared, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. "Their expansion threatens the established order. They refuse to acknowledge our superiority, reject our technology taxes, and, worst of all, they dare to explore the forbidden sectors." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. The Krillian delegate, a crystalline being that reflected light in prismatic patterns, chimed in with harmonic tones. "They are but infants in the cosmic scale, barely 2 centuries since they achieved faster-than-light travel. What could they possibly know of the ancient ways?" The debate continued for hours. Species that had ruled the stars for millennia discussed the human problem with increasing fervor. They spoke of Earth's rapid technological advancement, their stubborn independence, and their refusal to pay tribute to the older civilizations. What troubled them most was humanity's strange ability to adapt and overcome challenges that had broken other young species. "I propose we teach them a lesson," suggested Commander Thrak of the Gorvian Military Alliance. The massive, 6-legged warrior's voice rumbled like distant thunder. "A surgical strike. Destroy their outer colonies, blockade their trade routes. Show them the price of defiance." "No," interrupted High Counselor Yrix, an ancient being whose species had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. Direct military action could unite them. Humans are peculiar. They fight harder when cornered. We must be subtle. The Council eventually agreed on a plan. They would orchestrate a series of accidents and natural disasters to cripple human infrastructure. Pirates would raid human merchant vessels, always just beyond the reach of Earth's military. Economic sanctions would strangle their trade. Disease would spread through their colonies. All would appear unconnected, mere misfortune rather than coordinated attack. "They will beg for our protection," Zexnari said with satisfaction. "They will learn their place in the hierarchy of species." The plan was set in motion with ruthless efficiency. Within weeks, human colonies began experiencing mysterious equipment failures. Mining operations on Kepler 442b suffered catastrophic collapses. The agricultural domes on Proxima Centauri B developed unexplained blights that destroyed entire harvests. Pirates with suspiciously advanced weaponry struck human convoys with increasing boldness. On Earth, the Global Defense Council convened an emergency session. Admiral Sarah Chun studied the reports with growing concern. The patterns were too convenient, the timing too precise. Someone was orchestrating these attacks, but proving it would be nearly impossible. "They're trying to break us without firing a shot," she told the assembled military leaders. "Death by 1,000 cuts." General Marcus Rodriguez, a veteran of the Mars Uprising and the Europa campaign, leaned forward. "Then we need to remind them why Earth survived when our planet was trying to kill us every day." The first signs of humanity's response were subtle. Long-dormant military protocols were quietly activated. Reserve fleets were recalled from exploration missions. Scientists were reassigned to classified projects. Most telling of all, Earth's various nations set aside their differences with unprecedented speed. The Galactic Council, monitoring from afar, initially dismissed these movements. "They're panicking," Zexnari reported confidently. "Soon they'll come begging for aid." But then came the reports that made the council members pause. Human colonies weren't collapsing as expected. Instead, they were adapting with frightening speed. The miners on Kepler 442b developed new excavation techniques that made their operations more efficient than before. The farmers on Proxima Centauri B engineered new crops that not only resisted the blight, but thrived in conditions that would kill most vegetation. More disturbing were the stories from pirates who had survived encounters with human vessels. They spoke of merchant ships that suddenly sprouted weapons, of cargo haulers that moved with impossible agility, of human crews that fought with savage determination even when vastly outnumbered. Something's wrong, High Counselor Yyrix observed during a closed session. They're not weakening. They are evolving. The real shock came when the human ambassador to the Galactic Council, David Walsh, requested permission to address the assembly. He was a small figure compared to most of the alien delegates, but he carried himself with quiet confidence that made even the massive Gorvians uneasy. Distinguished members of the council, Walsh began, his voice calm and measured. We are aware that certain parties have been orchestrating attacks on human interests. We have evidence, though we choose not to present it at this time. The chamber fell silent. This was not the desperate plea for help they had expected. Walsh continued, humanity has a saying, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. You've tested us, pushed us, tried to break our spirit. We thank you for the lessons learned. Is that a threat? Zexnari demanded, his scales flushing a deeper purple. No, Walsh replied with a slight smile. It's a reminder. Earth's history is written in blood and survival. We evolve on a world that threw everything at us. Ice ages, plagues, predators, disasters. We didn't just survive, we thrived. We turned wolves into companions, harnessed the atom, reached for the stars despite every obstacle. He paused, letting his words sink in. You think you can break us with economic pressure and proxy attacks? Our ancestors survived the Black Death, world wars, nuclear winter. We've fought each other with weapons that could end civilization, and still we endured. And now, united against external threats, you've awakened something that was better left sleeping. The council members shifted uneasily. There was something unsettling about the human's calm demeanor, the absolute certainty in his voice. Consider this a courtesy warning, Walsh concluded. Cease your operations against humanity immediately, or discover why Earth's children are considered monsters in the ancient texts of species far older than any represented here. As Walsh left the chamber, panic began to spread among the council members. Ancient texts? What did he mean? Several representatives hurried to their archives, searching through historical records that hadn't been accessed in millennia. What they found chilled them to their cores. Buried in the oldest databases were fragmentary references to a quarantined sector of space, warnings about a death world whose children should never be provoked. The records were incomplete, damaged by time, but the message was clear. Something about Earth and its inhabitants had terrified civilizations that had long since turned to dust. But it was too late to call off their plan. The machinery of persecution had gained its own momentum. Pirates continued their raids. Saboteurs maintained their campaigns. The Galactic Council's members, trapped by their own arrogance, could only watch as humanity's response began to unfold. The first sign came from the Outer Rim territories. 3 pirate fleets, each comprising dozens of ships with crews from multiple species, simply vanished. No distress signals, no debris fields, no survivors. They entered human-controlled space and never returned. Then came reports from spy networks within human space. Massive construction projects detected in asteroid belts. Energy signatures that didn't match any known technology. Ship designs that defied conventional wisdom. Whatever humanity was building, it was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. The Council convened another emergency session. Fear had replaced arrogance in their discussions. We should negotiate, some suggested. Offer reparations, claim it was rogue elements. They won't believe us, Zexnari said, his former confidence shattered. We've shown our hand. Now we must see this through. But even as they debated, strange things began happening throughout Council space. Computer systems experienced mysterious glitches. Navigation beacons transmitted incorrect data. Supply chains faced inexplicable delays. It was as if an invisible hand was gently squeezing the economic life from the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. High Counselor Yyrix, old enough to remember patterns from ages past, spoke with grave concern. They're not attacking us. They're demonstrating capability. This is psychological warfare at a level we've never encountered. The counselor was right. Humanity wasn't interested in conventional warfare. They were playing a deeper game, one that drew upon thousands of years of conflict, survival, and adaptation. Every species had its strengths, but humans had something unique: the ability to turn adversity into advantage, to weaponize their own suffering, to emerge from catastrophe stronger than before. As reports continued to flow in, a terrible realization dawned on the Galactic Council. They had made a fundamental error in judgment. They saw humanity's youth in space as weakness, their diverse opinions as division, their adaptability as instability. They failed to understand that these were not flaws, but features honed by millions of years of evolution on a world that had tried to kill them at every turn. Now they were about to learn why Earth's children were monsters, not because they were cruel or savage, but because they were survivors. And in the cold darkness of space, there was no deadlier trait than the absolute refusal to surrender, no matter the odds. The Council's plan had succeeded in one regard. It had united humanity. But instead of breaking them, it had forged them into something far more dangerous. The scattered colonies and fractious nations of Earth had become a single entity with a shared purpose. And that purpose was to ensure that no one in the galaxy would ever mistake human kindness for weakness again. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the UES Nemesis, watching the tactical display with cold satisfaction. Her ship, one of humanity's new Revenant-class destroyers, hung invisible in the void between stars. Around her, 24 similar vessels maintained perfect formation, their experimental stealth systems rendering them undetectable to conventional sensors. Target acquired, her tactical officer reported. Gorvian supply convoy, 18 vessels, minimal escort. Elena nodded slowly. Remember our orders. No casualties if possible. We're sending a message, not starting a war. The Gorvian convoy never knew what hit them. One moment, they were traveling through what they believed was secure space. The next, their engines died simultaneously. Emergency systems failed. Communications went dark. The mighty warships that served as escorts found themselves as helpless as the cargo haulers they protected. Then, the humans appeared, their ships materializing from nothingness like ghosts. But, instead of attacking, they simply tractored the disabled vessels into a neat formation and transmitted a single message. Your cargo has been requisitioned as partial compensation for damages to human colonies. Your crews will be released unharmed at the nearest neutral station. Have a pleasant day. Halfway across the galaxy, similar scenes played out with choreographed precision. Vorthan mining operations found their equipment mysteriously reprogrammed to transfer extracted resources to human accounts. Krillian financial networks experienced glitches that redirected economic sanctions back to their originators. Every species that had participated in the campaign against humanity discovered that their attacks had been turned against them. But it was in the shadows where humanity's true monsters operated. They called themselves the Void Hunters, special forces units trained in tactics that would have been considered war crimes by civilized species. Except they weren't committing atrocities, they were preventing them. Major James Mitchell led one such unit. His team had infiltrated a secret Zexnari facility where biological weapons were being prepared for deployment against human colonies. The plan had been to release a pathogen that would target human DNA, specifically a violation of every treaty governing warfare. Mitchell's team moved through the facility like wraiths. They didn't kill the scientists and guards. Instead, they used neural disruptors that left their targets with temporary amnesia and an overwhelming desire to pursue different careers. The biological weapons were neutralized, the research destroyed, and the entire facility's purpose was forgotten by everyone who had worked there. Cleanup complete, Mitchell reported to his handlers. They'll wake up tomorrow thinking this was a food processing plant. The nightmares about what they almost did should keep them honest. On Earth, the real preparations were reaching their climax. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, in facilities that officially didn't exist, Dr. Yuki Tanaka put the finishing touches on humanity's answer to the Galactic Council's aggression. She called it Project Prometheus, though her colleagues had nicknamed it the galaxy's worst nightmare. It's not a weapon, she explained to the military officials observing her work. It's a demonstration of capability. We're going to show them exactly what humans can do when pushed to the edge. The project involved 3 components. First, a network of automated defense platforms that could be deployed instantly around any human world or installation. Second, a fleet of ships that incorporated technology reverse-engineered from every species that had attacked them, improved with human innovation. And third, the masterpiece, a mobile station that could terraform dead worlds in months rather than centuries. They try to destroy our colonies, Tanaka said with grim satisfaction. We're going to build 100 more. They tried to isolate us. We're going to create our own trade network. They wanted to prove their superiority. We're going to show them what a species that evolved on a death world can really do. The Galactic Council watched these developments with growing horror. Intelligence reports painted a picture of a species that had taken every attack against them and transformed it into a strength. The economic warfare had taught humans to be self-sufficient. The biological threats had spurred medical advances that made humans practically immune to disease. The pirate raids had forced them to militarize their entire merchant fleet. Ambassador Zexnari called another emergency session. His once proud bearing was gone, replaced by something that looked suspiciously like fear. We've created a monster, he admitted to his fellow counselors. Every action we took has made them stronger. Perhaps we should consider their ambassador's warning, suggested a minor species representative who had wisely stayed neutral. Apologize, make reparations, hope they show mercy. You don't understand, High Counselor Yrix said, his ancient voice heavy with dread. I've been researching the old archives. The warnings about Earth, they weren't about the humans' capacity for violence. They were about their capacity for growth. Every challenge makes them stronger. Every enemy teaches them new ways to fight. Every disaster forces them to evolve. The counselor projected ancient images, hieroglyphs from civilizations that had vanished eons ago. Look at these symbols. They all tell the same story. A species that shouldn't exist, born on a world that defied all logic. Gravity too high, radiation too strong, predators too deadly, climate too unstable. Any sensible species would have died. But humans, they thrived. So what do we do? Someone asked. Before anyone could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the council chamber. The massive view screen that dominated one wall flickered to life, showing something that defied belief. A human fleet, larger than anything they had imagined possible, had appeared at the edge of council space. But they weren't attacking. They were building. Within hours, massive structures began taking shape. Defense platforms that dwarfed anything the council species possessed. Industrial complexes that could process entire asteroids in days. And at the center, a space station that seemed to pulse with barely contained energy. A message arrived for the council, delivered by Admiral Chen herself via holographic projection. She appeared in their chamber, flanked by representatives from every human colony and nation. The diversity was striking, humans of every color and creed standing united. Members of the Galactic Council, Chen began, her voice carrying the weight of humanity's collective will. You wanted to see what Earth's children could do. Behold, the view screen changed, showing feeds from across human space. The colonies that had been attacked weren't just recovered. They were thriving beyond anything seen before. New cities rose from the ashes of the old. Technologies that the Council had thought impossible were being deployed casually. And everywhere, humans worked with a unity of purpose that terrified the watching aliens. You thought you could break us with fear, Chen continued. But fear is an old friend to humanity. We evolved alongside it, learned from it, conquered it. You thought economic pressure would make us kneel. But we survived ice ages with stone tools and fire. You thought disease would weaken us. But we turned the Black Death into medical revolution, polio into vaccination science. She paused, letting her words sink in. Every attack you made taught us your weaknesses. Every weapon you used showed us new possibilities. Every attempt to destroy us only revealed new ways to survive. This is what you failed to understand about humans. We are not strong in spite of our struggles. We are strong because of them. The demonstration continued. Human ships performed maneuvers that should have torn them apart. Weapons that bent the laws of physics. Shield systems that seemed to predict attacks before they happened. It was as if humanity had compressed 1,000 years of advancement into months. But here's the thing, Chen said, her tone shifting. We're not monsters. We're survivors. And survivors know that the best victory is the one where everyone walks away alive. So we're going to make you an offer. The council held its collective breath. Join us, Chen said simply. Not as subjects or vassals, but as partners. We'll share our technology, our trade routes, our protection. All we ask is that you never again mistake our desire for peace as weakness. Never again try to break us. Because this, she gestured to the display of human power, is what we built in 6 months while fighting for survival. Imagine what we could build together in peace. The offer hung in the air like a challenge. The same species they had tried to crush was now extending a hand of friendship, backed by the implicit threat of what would happen if that hand was rejected. Commander Thrak, the Gorvian military leader who had first suggested attacking humanity, was the first to speak. They could destroy us all. Why offer partnership? Chun smiled, and in that smile was the entire history of human diplomacy, the carrot and the stick perfectly balanced. Because destruction is easy. Any fool with a big enough weapon can destroy. But building? Creating? That's what separates the civilized from the savage. We choose to build. The question is, will you build with us, or will you force us to build without you? The council members looked at each other, seeing their own fear reflected in alien eyes. They had awakened something ancient and terrible, a species that had been forged in the crucible of a hostile world and emerged unbroken. But that same species was offering them a choice that their own arrogance would never have allowed them to make. High Counselor Yrix stood slowly, his great age showing in every movement. I have lived long enough to see empires rise and fall. I have watched species bloom and wither. But never have I seen anything like humanity. You take catastrophe and transform it into catalyst. You face extinction and emerge evolved. You are indeed monsters, but perhaps that's exactly what this galaxy needs. He turned to his fellow counselors. I vote to accept their offer. Not from fear, though fear would be justified, but from wisdom. They have shown us what they can do as enemies. Perhaps it's time to see what they can do as friends. One by one, the other council members began to stand. Some did so from fear, others from respect, and a few from genuine admiration for what humanity had accomplished. The vote, when it came, was unanimous. But even as they accepted humanity's offer, none of them could shake the feeling that they had just witnessed something unprecedented. A species had been pushed to the brink of destruction and had responded not with desperate violence, but with calculated demonstration of power coupled with an offer of partnership. It was perhaps the most human response possible, and that, more than all the weapons and technology, was what truly marked them as monsters. Not monsters of cruelty or destruction, but monsters of adaptation, of survival, of the absolute refusal to accept defeat. As the formal agreements were drawn up, establishing humanity as full partners in galactic civilization, the various species representatives couldn't help but wonder what other surprises Earth's children had in store. They had learned, too late, that the most dangerous monster is not the one that destroys, but the one that endures, adapts, and emerges stronger from every challenge. The galaxy would never be the same. 6 months after the partnership agreement, the galaxy was experiencing something unprecedented. Human trade stations appeared at strategic points throughout known space. Each one a marvel of engineering that combined the best technologies from multiple species with distinctly human innovations. But it was what happened inside these stations that truly demonstrated humanity's unique approach to galactic relations. Station Commander Maria Santos watched with satisfaction as delegates from the Krillian Collective and the Thorian Confederacy sat across from each other at a negotiation table. These two species had been locked in a Cold War for 3 centuries, their crystalline and gaseous forms so different that communication had been deemed impossible. Yet here they were, using human-designed universal translators that didn't just convert language, but also adapted concepts to be understood across vastly different cognitive structures. The humans are mediating between us, the Krillian representative chimed to his aid, his crystalline form pulsing with cautious optimism. Somehow they understand both our perspectives. It was a scene repeated across human space. Earth's children had become the galaxy's negotiators, its builders, its problem solvers, not through force or dominance, but through an almost supernatural ability to adapt to any situation and find solutions where others saw only obstacles. But not everyone was pleased with humanity's rapid rise. In the dark corners of space, where the light of civilization rarely reached, conspiracies were forming. Species that had profited from the old order, who had built their power on the oppression of younger races, watched humanity's influence grow with mounting concern. The hegemony of shadows, a secretive alliance of ancient species that had ruled from behind the scenes for millennia, convened in a place that existed between dimensions. Their forms were indistinct, shaped by eons of evolution beyond physical constraints. The humans spread too quickly, one shadow whispered, its voice like the echo of dying stars. They unite species that should remain divided. They share technologies that should remain exclusive. They threaten the natural order. Then, we must remind them of their place, another replied. They defeated the Galactic Council through cleverness and adaptation. But they have never faced beings like us. We who have transcended physical limitations, who can strike from dimensions they cannot perceive. The plan they hatched was insidious in its simplicity. They would attack not humanity's bodies or colonies, but their minds. Psychic assaults that would drive humans mad, dimensional rifts that would swallow their ships, temporal anomalies that would erase their achievements. The young species would learn that there were forces in the universe beyond their comprehension. The first attacks came without warning. Human ships traveling through hyperspace suddenly found themselves in nightmare realms where physics had no meaning. Colonists reported shared dreams of cosmic horror, visions that left even the most stable individuals questioning reality. Space stations experienced temporal loops, forcing their inhabitants to relive the same terrifying day endlessly. On Earth, the Global Defense Council's emergency chambers were filled with grim faces. General Rodriguez studied reports that defied conventional analysis. "We're not dealing with standard warfare," he said. "This is something else, something that attacks the very nature of reality." Admiral Chun, now serving as humanity's supreme military commander, turned to a figure who had been quiet throughout the briefing. Dr. Elizabeth Harper was not a soldier or scientist in the traditional sense. She was something unique to humanity, a specialist in the impossible. "You were right to call me," Harper said, her eyes holding depths that seemed to reflect the void itself. "What you're facing is dimensional warfare, psychic terrorism, the kind of threat that most species would consider mythological. Can we fight it?" Chen asked. Harper smiled, and it was not entirely a comforting expression. "Admiral, humanity has been fighting the impossible since we first looked at the ocean and decided to cross it. We've always had those among us who could touch the ineffable, shamans, mystics, visionaries. We call them different names, but they were all the same thing. Humans who could perceive beyond the veil." She stood, moving to the holographic display showing the locations of the attacks. Every human culture has stories of fighting demons, of standing against forces beyond comprehension. We thought they were myths. But what if they were training? What if our entire species has been preparing for this moment? Within days, Harper had assembled a team unlike any military unit in human history. Psychologists who had studied the edges of human consciousness. physicists who worked with theoretical dimensions, artists who claimed to dream of other realities, soldiers who had survived encounters that couldn't be explained by conventional science. They called themselves the Void Guard, humanity's answer to threats that existed beyond normal space-time. Their training was as much meditation as military drill, their weapons as much willpower as technology. They learned to navigate the spaces between dimensions, to fight battles in realms where thought and reality merged. The Shadow Hegemony's next attack came at Colony Sigma 7, a research station on the edge of human space. Reality itself seemed to tear apart as beings of living darkness emerged from impossible angles, their very presence causing madness in those who looked upon them. But the humans were ready. Void Guard units deployed using technology that shouldn't have existed, armor that phased between dimensions, weapons that fired concentrated possibility, shields made of crystallized determination. They met the shadow beings in a battlefield that existed in multiple realities simultaneously. Lieutenant Sarah Kim found herself facing a creature of pure entropy, a thing that unmade reality simply by existing. By all logic, she should have been driven mad or erased from existence. Instead, she laughed. "You think you're scary?" she shouted at the writhing mass of impossibility. "I grew up in Chicago during the climate wars. I've seen my species face nuclear winter, super plagues, and our own stupidity. You're just another Tuesday." Her weapon, a fusion of human engineering and principles stolen from the edge of sanity, fired a beam of coherent reality that forced the shadow being to assume a physical form. Once material, it was vulnerable. Once vulnerable, it could be defeated. Across the colony, similar battles raged. Humans faced horrors from beyond the veil and responded with something the Shadow Hegemony had never encountered: joyful defiance. Where other species would have cowered or gone mad, humans adapted. They learned the rules of impossible combat in real time, turning each defeat into a lesson, each small victory into a new tactic. The battle lasted for hours in real space, centuries in the dimensions between. When it was over, Colony Sigma 7 still stood. The shadow beings had been repelled, some destroyed, others fleeing back to dimensions where human willpower couldn't follow. But humanity wasn't content with defense. In secure facilities across Earth and its colonies, scientists and mystics worked together on Project Lighthouse, an attempt to understand and map the dimensions from which the attacks had come. They discovered something that shook the foundations of known science. The human brain, evolved under the chaotic conditions of Earth, had developed latent abilities to perceive and interact with multiple dimensions. "It makes sense," Dr. Harper explained to the assembled leadership. "Our ancestors had to deal with predators that could appear from any direction, weather that changed in minutes, disasters that came without warning. We evolved pattern recognition that borders on precognition, spatial awareness that extends beyond 3 dimensions, and, most importantly, the ability to remain functional when reality stops making sense." The Shadow Hegemony, observing from their interdimensional strongholds, began to experience something they hadn't felt in eons: doubt. Their attacks, which had broken 1,000 species before humanity, were not only failing but making the humans stronger. Each assault taught the young species new ways to perceive and manipulate reality. Worse, humanity was beginning to strike back. Void Guard units launched raids into dimensional space, mapping the territories of beings that had thought themselves untouchable. Human scientists developed weapons that could wound creatures of pure thought. Most terrifyingly, human mystics began to appear in the psychic realms that the Shadow Hegemony had considered their exclusive domain. The ancient beings convened again, their forms now flickering with uncertainty. "They're learning too quickly," one said. "Each attack teaches them our nature. Soon they will be able to find us." "Perhaps," said the eldest among them, a being so old it remembered when the universe was young, "we have made the same mistake as the Galactic Council. We saw their youth as weakness. But these humans, they are not young. They carry the weight of 1,000,000 years of evolution on a world that tried to kill them with every sunrise. They have been preparing for us since before they knew we existed. As if to punctuate this observation, alarms began to sound in their dimensional stronghold. Human ships, modified with technologies that blended science and something stranger, appeared at the edges of their realm. The vessels shouldn't have been able to exist in that space, yet there they were broadcasting a simple message to the beings who call themselves the Shadow Hegemony. This is Admiral Chun of the United Earth Forces. You attacked our people. You tried to break our minds and erase our existence. This was unwise. We offer you the same choice we gave the Galactic Council. End your hostilities and negotiate or face the full capabilities of a species that has made the impossible possible since we first decided that we could fly. The message continued. We have mapped 17% of your dimensional territories. Our Void Guard has developed countermeasures to your psychic weapons. Our scientists are currently working on ways to make your form of existence uncomfortable. But we would prefer peace. The question is, do you? The Shadow Hegemony faced a crisis. For the first time in a long existence, they had encountered a species that could not only survive their attacks, but learn from them, adapt to them, and ultimately transcend them. The humans were offering negotiation from a position of growing strength. If we continue to fight, one shadow being observed, they will eventually master our realm as they've mastered physical space. If we negotiate, we acknowledge them as equals, another finished. Something we've never done with a younger species. The eldest spoke with the weight of eons, pride or survival. We've seen what happens to those who choose pride against humanity. The decision, when it came, reshaped the very fabric of galactic civilization. The Shadow Hegemony, beings that most species hadn't even known existed, emerged from their dimensional isolation to treat with humanity. The negotiations took place in a space between spaces, where human Void Guards stood as equals with creatures of living thought. What emerged from those talks was more than a peace treaty. It was a fundamental reimagining of what was possible. The Shadow Hegemony, with their mastery of dimensional science, joined with human innovation and adaptability. Technologies that had been hoarded for millions of years were shared. Techniques for transcending physical limitations were taught to those humans who could comprehend them. In return, humanity offered something the ancient beings had lost eons ago: perspective. The human viewpoint, shaped by chaos and survival, saw possibilities that beings of pure order had missed. Where the Shadow Hegemony saw dimensional space as a tool for dominance, humans saw it as a frontier to explore, a problem to solve, a friend to make. The galaxy watched in awe as humanity formed an alliance with beings that most hadn't known existed. Trade routes now extended through dimensional space, cutting travel times by orders of magnitude. Human Void Guards and Shadow Hegemony thought forms worked together to police the spaces between realities, protecting younger species from threats they couldn't comprehend. But perhaps the most significant change was philosophical. Humanity had faced gods and monsters, beings that could reshape reality with a thought, and had not only survived but thrived. They had proven that no force in the universe, no matter how ancient or powerful, could break the human spirit. The Galactic Council, now reorganized with humanity as a senior partner, met in a new chamber that existed partially in multiple dimensions. Ambassador Walsh, the same man who had delivered humanity's first warning, stood before beings both physical and transcendent. "We've shown you what Earth's children can do," he said, his words rippling through multiple layers of reality. "We face your economics, your weapons, your gods, and your nightmares. Each time, we emerge stronger. Not because we're superior, but because we're adaptable. We're the species that looked at an uncaring universe and decided to care anyway." He paused, looking at the assembled beings: crystalline Krillians, gaseous Thorians, transcendent shadow forms, and dozens of others. The old ways, domination, hierarchy, the strong preying on the weak, they're done. Humanity offers a new path. Growth through challenge, strength through diversity, survival through adaptation. We've proven these principles work against any threat. Now, let's see what they can build in peace. The chamber erupted in communication across all spectrums: sound, light, thought, and methods that had no names in any language. It was chaos, but it was the chaos of creation, of possibilities being born. Earth's monsters had not conquered the galaxy. They had done something far more profound. They had changed it. The children of a death world had taught ancient civilizations how to live, how to grow, how to face the impossible with a grin and a clever solution. And in the depths of space, in dimensions both known and theoretical, the word spread. Humanity was here. They could not be broken, could not be stopped, could not be made to kneel. They were the monsters that chose to be heroes, the chaos that chose to create, the survivors who chose to help others survive. The galaxy would never know a more terrifying or wonderful truth. 10 years had passed since humanity's alliance with the Shadow Hegemony, and the galaxy had transformed beyond recognition. Human-designed trade networks connected not just star systems but dimensional planes. Species that had been isolated for millennia now worked together on projects that defied the old limitations of physics and philosophy. But the universe had one more test for Earth's children. It began with the deep space monitoring stations detecting an anomaly beyond the galactic edge. Something vast was approaching, not a fleet or an armada, but a singular presence that warped space-time around it like a black hole given consciousness. Ancient automated systems, old beyond memory, suddenly activated across 1,000 worlds, broadcasting warnings in languages that predated current civilizations. In the interdimensional council chambers, panic spread like wildfire. Even the Shadow Hegemony, beings of immense power and age, recoiled from what the sensors were showing. The Devourers, High Counselor Yrix whispered, his ancient form trembling. They've returned. Admiral Chun, now enhanced with dimensional perception granted by humanity's evolution, studied the data with grim determination. Explain, she commanded. The eldest of the Shadow Hegemony, a being so old it had witnessed the birth of galaxies, spoke with a voice heavy with dread. Their entropy given form. Civilizations that chose to consume rather than create. They sweep through galaxies like locusts, taking all matter, all energy, all life, leaving nothing but void. We thought they had passed beyond our local cluster eons ago. Why are they returning? Chen asked. Because, the being replied, they sense something new. Humanity's rapid growth, your dimensional technologies, the unity you've brought to the galaxy. It's like a beacon to them. They feed on potential, on civilizations at their peak. And, thanks to you, this galaxy has never been more vibrant, more full of potential. The implications were staggering. Humanity's success had inadvertently attracted the attention of beings that consumed entire galactic civilizations. The very achievements that had saved them from the Galactic Council's oppression had marked them as prey for something infinitely worse. But Chen didn't despair. Instead, she smiled, an expression that had become legendary across the galaxy as a sign that humans were about to do something impossible. So, they're cosmic locusts, she said. Good. We know how to deal with pests. Emergency protocols activated across human space. The Void Guard, now a multi-species organization trained in impossible warfare, began preparations for a conflict that would dwarf all previous challenges. Scientists from every member species collaborated on weapons that pushed the boundaries of reality. And on Earth, in chambers that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously, humanity's greatest minds gathered to do what they did best: find a solution to an unsolvable problem. Dr. Tanaka, now elderly but with eyes sharpened by years of bending reality to human will, presented the first analysis. The Devourers operate by converting all matter and energy in their path into more of themselves. They're not just destroying, they're reproducing, spreading like a virus across cosmic scales. Then, we treat them like a virus, suggested Dr. Harper, her consciousness now partially extended into dimensional space. We need an antibody, something that can match their consumption with creation. The solution they developed was audacious even by human standards. If the Devourers fed on potential and consumed everything in their path, then humanity would create faster than they could consume. They would turn the entire galaxy into a generative engine, producing matter and energy at rates that defied conventional physics. Project Genesis, as it came to be known, required the cooperation of every species in the galaxy. The Krillians contributed their mastery of energy manipulation. The Gorvians provided military logistics on a scale never before attempted. The Shadow Hegemony opened dimensional channels that allowed resources to be pulled from alternate realities. And humanity? Humanity did what it always did. It adapted, innovated, and refused to accept defeat. Construction began on a network of creation engines, massive structures that use controlled Big Bang events to generate new matter from quantum foam. Entire star systems were converted into industrial complexes that produced not weapons, but stars themselves, newborn suns that would be hurled at the approaching Devourers like cosmic ammunition. But the Devourers were not passive targets. As they entered the galaxy's outer edge, their true horror became apparent. They were not ships or creatures in any conventional sense. They were mobile regions of space where physics went to die, where matter simply ceased to exist, where the fundamental constants of reality were overwritten with a single imperative: consume. The first defensive line, comprising the most powerful warships the galaxy could muster, lasted less than an hour. The Devourers didn't destroy the ships. They simply unmade them, converting every atom into more of their own impossible substance. Entire star systems vanished in days, leaving behind voids that hurt to perceive. But humanity had anticipated this. As the Devourers advanced, they encountered something unprecedented: regions of space that generated matter faster than they could consume it. Stars bloomed into existence. Planets formed from quantum probability. Entire nebulae erupted from pinpoints of compressed creation. It was like trying to drain an ocean that refilled faster than it could empty. The Devourers, for the first time in their eons-long existence, slowed. Captain Vasquez, commanding a fleet of Void Guard ships that existed partially outside normal space, led the counterattack. "They're confused," she reported. "They've never encountered resistance like this. Time to press our advantage." Human tactics, refined through countless impossible battles, came into play. Ships phased in and out of dimensional space, striking at the Devourers' edges where their consumption field was weakest. Weapons fired not destruction, but pure creation. Beams of compressed genesis that forced new universes to bloom within the Devourers' mass, causing them to choke on infinity. Meanwhile, Earth itself had become a fortress of impossibility. The entire planet phased between dimensions on a rotating schedule, never staying in one reality long enough to be targeted. Its moon had been converted into a creation engine so powerful that it constantly generated new versions of itself, a satellite that existed in infinite quantum states simultaneously. The battle raged across scales both cosmic and quantum. In regions where distance had meaning, fleets clashed with entropy incarnate. In dimensions where thought shaped reality, human void guards and allied consciousness beings fought battles of pure will against the Devourers' endless hunger. And in the spaces between spaces where even concepts went to die, something unexpected happened. The Devourers began to communicate. It wasn't language in any sense that carbon-based life could understand. It was more like the universe itself groaning under an impossible weight. But Dr. Harper, her consciousness now more energy than flesh, understood. "They're not invaders," she broadcast to the Allied command. "They're, oh God, they're trying to die." The revelation reshattered everyone's understanding of the conflict. The Devourers weren't conquerors. They were a civilization that had made a terrible mistake eons ago. In their pursuit of immortality, they had transformed themselves into self-replicating consumption, unable to stop, unable to die, unable to do anything but feed on the universe they had once loved. They've been searching for someone who could stop them, Harper continued, her voice carrying across dimensional barriers. Every galaxy they've consumed, they hoped would have the strength to end their curse. But none could match their hunger. Until now, Admiral Chun processed this information in nanoseconds. Earth's children had faced many challenges, but this was unique, an enemy that wanted to lose, a plague that begged for a cure. All forces, she commanded, switched to Protocol Mercy. Across the galaxy, the nature of the battle changed. Instead of trying to overwhelm the Devourers with creation, humanity, and its allies began working on something far more complex, a way to give entropy itself peace. The solution came from an unexpected source. A human child on Colony Nova 3, gifted with dimensional sight from birth, suggested something so simple it had been overlooked. If they can't stop eating, she said, give them something that fills them up forever. That child's insight led to the development of the satiation bomb, a weapon that was also a gift. It contained not matter or energy, but satisfied potential, the quantum state of having already consumed everything that could ever exist. It was paradox made manifest, a fullness that could never be emptied. The deployment required sacrifice. Volunteer ships, crews from every species, including humanity, flew directly into the Devourers' consumption fields carrying these impossible weapons. They knew they wouldn't survive, but they also knew they were offering mercy to beings that had suffered for longer than most galaxies had existed. The effect was immediate and profound. As the satiation bombs detonated, the Devourers' endless hunger finally, impossibly, was satisfied. The consumption fields collapsed, not in destruction, but in completion. For the first time in eons, the beings that had become entropy itself experienced peace. What emerged from the collapsed fields was unexpected. The Devourers, freed from their curse, reverted to their original form.